My name is Blair Williams. Today is June 12th, 2024. I'm here at the Cumberland County Historical Society with Thomas McCurdy. So thank you. So we're here today mainly to talk about the derailment that occurred around Brandtsville on April 28th, 1963. Do I have that right?
Yes,
All right. So, Tom, you were at the scene with the Lemoyne Fire Department.
I was a 16-year-old firefighter from Citizens Fire Company number 1 in Lemoyne. We got a call of a train wreck in Brandtsville with fire. We were called after Mechanicsburg, Lower Allen, Sharmanstown, probably Upper Allen, and we got a call. They wanted manpower, and we got there, and shortly after I was there, I responded out on our Engine 3, which was a 1953 Persh fire truck, and we got there and they told me that it had exploded. I didn't feel the explosion, but the second explosion happened, and I think the second explosion was the largest explosion that created the mushroom cloud that is in the pictures that are on Facebook and the internet and all over the place. And I felt that explosion. I felt the ground move. We then helped them take the injured parties out of the area, put them into the ambulances. They had ambulances from all over the place, and I can't name where they were from, but it was all the local ambulances. If I'm not mistaken, in 1963, Harrisburg Hospital may have run an ambulance. Anyhow, we helped them do that, and then we played more water on the fire. We didn't know, or they didn't announce to us what was involved, and it was liquid propane gas. It was what do you put in swimming pools?
Chlorine.
Chlorine, and a caustic solvent, which they never did say what the stuff was.
Mm.
We helped with the hoses, moved hoses from here to there. I'm pretty sure they drafted out of the Yellow Breeches Creek until they realized that the solvent had got into the creek or not. There's a question in many of the articles I've read that it did or didn't get in. I don't remember whether they said it did. I seem to remember they said it did. It burned. I believe the fire lasted for at least 3 days. Being 1963, I was in school, and I was allowed to leave school and stay at the scene along with 2 or 3 other school students from other schools and other members of the Lemoyne Fire Department. And we were housed at the old Upper Allen Firehouse. And I have a picture of that, which I'd be more than happy to share with you. And what they did, they needed cots for us to sleep on. So they called the county base station, which was in Carlisle. I believe at the time it was in the Dauphin County Prison is where it was. No. There was a base station in Lemoyne that dispatched all the West Shore fire companies, and all the Carlisle from New Kingston on up were dispatched from the Carlisle base station in the prison. They called for 24 cots the word got out that they needed 24 cops. So within a half hour, 24 at least state troopers showed up. We eventually got the cots. We eventually went to bed, and we slept there. I remember sleeping there 2 nights. The second morning, they decided to wake us up, and I had chosen a place to sleep beside the bell of the fire truck. They decided to wake us up by ringing the bell. So the bell on the fire truck woke me up, and my head was 14 inches away from the bell. So I had a waking. They called in the National Guard. The National Guard came in with, I don't remember what the vehicles were they came in. I don't remember any of that. But they were set up in a tent, and it was a huge tent. And we went in there to check in and tell who we were and why we were there. And this was in April. And I remember it being cold out, because when we went into the tent, it was so hot that everybody in the tent were in their t-shirts. Now, we weren't in the tent very long. We were there. We were released before, I believe, the fire was out. But they did have everything, all the trucks were lined up so that they could put out the fire, because I don't think they lost any equipment in the explosions, but I know that there were people injured. I don't know the extent of that. I think there's articles maybe in the paper. 22 injured. Yes. So yes, that's how I remember it. And I remember after the fire, there was a big discussion about how we should handle things like that, because I don't think in 1963 that they had all the pre-planning that they do have today. Today, the Cumberland County Dispatch has their own building up here in Carlisle, and they have a system that's just out of this world. I was invited to it, and I saw it. I later became assistant fire chief in Lemoyne, and I was invited to see their base station, and it is a very state-of-the-art. I mean, it's great. When the phone call comes into their place, they know who you are, where you're calling from, even a cell phone. There was a lot of work was done that was unheroic work, moving stuff, moving debris so that we could check and see what was on fire and what wasn't on fire. We called it overall. And then we just poured water on it and then kept pouring water on it. And at the time, I don't remember if they used tankers or not, or if all the water did come from the creek. I just don't know. I don't even know if there was hydrants out there. I just don't remember. Mm-hmm. At the time, I may have known it. Okay, we're going to have to put it on pause until I figure out what else.
Well, no, I mean, I have some questions in terms of.
Oh, go ahead.
You'd mentioned when we were looking through some of the photos that Jim Bradley had taken that are now in the collection of the Historical Society, that Lemoyne was a little bit of an outlier in the sense that you had 3 oxygen tanks with masks, and a lot of the other departments either had 1 or even none, which I imagine played into the hospitalization of some of the chlorine inhalation that occurred.
Absolutely. In 1962, I was 15 years old, and I joined the fire company. Mm-hmm. I had absolutely positively no training whatsoever, and we were responding to a fire, a working fire in the city of Harrisburg. One of the reasons that City of Harrisburg called us was that we had 3 Scott air packs. They were housed in suitcases. And I got to the scene, and the chief at the time said, "Tom, I'm going to show you what a Scott air pack is." And I looked at him saying, "What's a Scott air pack?" So he got this out, put it on me, strapped me all up, put the mask on, and I immediately went over to the fire, had a working fire entry hose line, and I went in and fought fire. No training, no nothing. Lemoyne had 3 Scott air packs. I don't think the city had any at the time. Sharmanstown may have had 1. Lower Allen may have had 1 or 2. But it seems as though that Lemoyne seemed to be the state of the technology what it was. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because there was a fire equipment salesman who was very close to us in Lemoyne. And he would show us stuff that, was just being manufactured. And but anyhow, we had Scott air packs, and it was a good 5 years before we really became fully equipped with air masks. We had a rescue truck which had air masks mounted in the back of it, where you could sit down and put an air mask on as you were going to the scene of the fire. Now, everyone has an air mask on. I was in the fire company when they called us tailboard Charlies, which we could ride on the back of the fire truck. Well, nobody rides on the back of the fire truck. It seems as though that the survivors of a fire truck crash sued a fire truck manufacturer, and the fire truck manufacturer was found they were guilty of not providing it. So now everybody goes inside, everybody has a seatbelt on, everybody has an air mask. Training in my time, early time at the fire department, there was no such thing as training. Then we started having training every Wednesday night, and it was throughout the fire department. Then the Cumberland County Fire Chiefs Association, I think is that, had a training officer that we trained with then. Mm-hmm. Now, it's so totally different. I mean, before you can go even enter a fire scene, you have to, I think, have 40 hours of training. It was several years before, I think, Harrisburg. Now, Dave Halseel is the historian of the City of Harrisburg Fire Department. He can probably give you the exact dates and times and
sure
where they came from. And he's younger than I, so he would be remembering better than I. And then everybody got them.
Yep.
And they all have them now. I don't even know if Scott self-contained breathing apparatus, Scuba, was the premier company. And I don't know if they're even still in business.
The other thing we were discussing is the explosions didn't take place until a number of hours after the fire started, and there were a whole bunch of firefighters and other individuals on the scene. And we were looking at one of the photos where you mentioned that you thought that was before the first explosion, where 3 individuals were standing on top of one of the cars, and you thought those were people who were eventually blown off the cars after one of the explosions. Can you just what was the scene? What was the scene like during that commotion? I guess just that sort of unexpected. You think you have this fire about to be under control, and then it just.
We were under the impression that we were going to cool the tanks.
Mhm.
That's what we were taught in the one short year. You cool the tank, and once you get the tank cooled, you can put the fire out. We later on had training where we would practice cooling a tank, and I think that they were thinking that we're going to have this thing under control sooner rather than later.
Yep.
Now, I think they were all aware that there was liquid propane, chlorine, and they never named what the other caustic chemical was.
Mhm.
If they didn't know, didn't share it. I don't know if the railroad shared it. I don't know. But uh, what is, I think it was more of a calmed situation as opposed to a panic situation.
Okay.
I don't know that anyone anticipated the explosions. And after there was one explosion, I don't think anybody thought there was going to be a second one. I don't think anybody thought there was going to be a third. There
Mhm.
were three separate explosions. And someone with a better memory than I can say when the mushroom cloud,
Yeah.
and they say the mushroom cloud was 300 feet in the air. You'll have to, you'll check
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I mean, the newspaper records have the details, but.
good. And if the newspaper records contradict something I said,
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what I can remember.
Yep.
I'm 77 years old. Uh, I had COVID and was in intensive care for 4 days with COVID,
Hmm.
and I'm having the
Yeah.
the loss of memory. When I was in intensive care, I had no memory of who I was, where I was, or
Hmm.
what was going on. But anyhow, with therapists, we've brought me this far. But yes, I think that you can see them standing up there, and they don't seem to be very concerned.
Yeah. Like that's. Yeah.
Yeah, right there, right there. That one that Jim is who took the
Jim Bradley took these particular photos. So.
now. Not that we were blasé,
Yep.
but I think that it was we got this, and maybe it would have been Upper Allen's first call. Probably would have been Upper Allen because we slept at the Upper Allen firehouse, so
Mhm.
I'm sure that was the closest thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just imagine too for you. I mean, you've only been doing this for a year. You're 16 years old. You're
Yes.
at this fire scene, and all of a sudden there's explosions. I know one reporter, I think from the Patriot, got hit with shrapnel. There's a chlorine. People are inhaling chlorine and probably fainting and all this other stuff, and burn wounds and all from the explosion. And I have to imagine that what was going through your mind when all this was happening.
What was going through my mind is that I was going to help whatever firefighter was injured. I was going to help them get to
Hmm.
an ambulance. I mean, we didn't have EMTs in 1963. They didn't have that wasn't such a thing. And I would we would be told, go down there and help them move this, help them move that. Uh, was debris laying on our hose lines? Did we move debris? Later on, I had a friend who lived in the vicinity of that, and we went to his house one time, and we found what we called debris from
Hmm.
the the explosion, and this was a really far distance away from where the explosion was. And it says in the newspaper articles how far the debris went.
Yeah. Well, I know when we posted these photos on our Facebook page, there were people commenting that they're still finding debris
I believe that.
on the mountainside there. So,
But
uh,
as being there, I remember helping. No heroic thing, just helping.
yep.
You know, they needed somebody to take a Stokes litter. We needed, you know, there was manpower, and at 16 years old, I was able to do such a thing.
Yeah.
And but I can remember there was a panic. Not a, I mean, we weren't afraid. I
Yep.
mean, but we were panicking to who got hurt, get them taken care of. And did we think there was going to be a second explosion? Did we think that, you know, and was there always a possibility? Yes. And did the people, the chiefs, like the Upper Island Fire Chief at the time, and I have no idea who it was.
I guess were they reevaluating the
Yes,
scene after?
yes, absolutely. They when they realized that we had an explosion, now we have more fire.
Hmm.
Did they call more companies in? I don't know. They very likely did, because there were a lot of fire companies there. And I think they reevaluated everything after the first explosion. Absolutely.
So you spent 3 days fighting this particular fire.
Yes.
I guess after you went home, did you what were your thoughts about that experience? Because I imagine that was this probably one of the bigger events of your firefighting career,
Uh,
or maybe not.
the biggest event of my firefighting career was in Lemoyne.
Yeah.
That Randy Watts's book talks about the West Shore Lumberyard fire.
Okay.
I was the third man on the scene of a lumberyard and 7 businesses burning. So that was probably the biggest fire I was ever at.
Yeah.
And I mean, we tried to advance, and the fire was so hot we couldn't get within 50 feet of it.
Hmm.
But in my young career, I remember saying, I'm going to continue this career.
Okay.
I want to help more, save lives, save property, put the fire out, uh, and
So is this a catalyzing moment, or had you already pretty much settled on?
I had pretty much settled on that I was going to do that,
Yeah.
and this just underlined it.
Yep.
And I was a firefighter from till I got too old to do it. As I said, I ended up being an assistant fire chief in Lemoyne.
Hmm. What was some of the other equipment that you were using at the scene? You mentioned you weren't sure if it was tankers, but was it fairly modern equipment for the
No,
time?
uh, it was what we had, and what we had were 2.5-inch hoses, and that was the biggest lines we had to attack a fire. And all these lines are 2.5-inch lines, and you could put a lot of fire out with 2.5-inch lines. Now they have, I think a 6-inch line is an attack line now. I know you'd have to
Yeah.
get with the experts now, because I, I've I've seen the fire trucks of today as compared to the fire truck that I knew and learned to drive on. I learned to drive on that 53 Persh fire truck, and the basics of a fire truck are the same.
Hmm.
It's just there's a lot more technology on them now.
Sure.
But what we did was hose and water. As my friend, the late John Starr, who was fire chief in Lemoyne and assistant fire chief at the Navy Depot, said, put the wet stuff on the red stuff.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we did, drown it. Now, was there any chemical I don't remember anything hazmat. I don't know that that was even talked about at the time. But no, what we had, what we used is what we had. There was
Yeah.
no advanced. There was no advanced equipment that I can think of.
Okay. So, did you stay with the Lemoyne Fire Company pretty much continuous, or?
Yes, I stayed with Lemoyne Fire Company and was active with Lemoyne Fire Company right prior to them joining with Wormleysburg to make the West Shore Bureau of Fire. I never responded to an alarm with the West Shore Bureau of Fire. Every fire company, every fire I went to was with the Lemoyne Fire Department. We became members. Oh, there were 4 or 5 of us ran around together.
Mhm.
We became members of other fire companies, so that if we were around, we could respond to those fires, particularly during the day, and we could help out at the fire, and we were covered by the fire company insurance.
Mm.
And so I was a member of all the fire companies in Wormleysburg, Lower Allen, uh, Sharmanstown. Uh, I ran a little bit with City of Harrisburg out of Engine 8, Mount Pleasant. Not very much. Most of the firefighting we did in Harrisburg was through Lemoyne Fire Company because we were one of the first people they called.
Yep.
And the old Williams Grove Fire Department, which is now Monroe Township Fire Department. Williams Grove had a firehouse right outside the park,
Hmm.
and they had the Williams Grove Fire Company. They had one engine, and I have yet to find a picture of it, but I can remember
Yeah.
being there.
So, you mentioned the lumberyard fire. When did that occur?
1965, September of 1965.
So it was only 2 years after this derailment.
That's right.
Wow.
And I was not an officer yet. I was still a firefighter, but I lived right down the street from the lumberyard. And I can remember I always wore socks to go to the fire because you put socks on in your boots and you didn't get sore feet.
Hmm.
I remember saying, I wonder what kind of call this is going to be. And I went out the door and looked, and it was in the sky.
Oh,
And we, there again, surrounded and drowned it, surrounded and drowned it. The fire was not put out. It was in September of 65, and the final fire was put out in December 24th, 1965. The 3rd Street Bridge that goes from Lemoyne to New Cumberland, they had used coal and or ashes as a backfill for that hill. And the fire had gotten into that coal and or ashes. And we had to go in underneath there and dig out whatever was hot.
Mm.
And so we spent Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1965. We pulled the last hot coals out of there and put them out. And I don't know whether the state came in or I don't know who else came in to do whatever they needed to do, because as I recall, that's the problem they have with Centralia.
yeah.
It got underneath there. As far as the lumberyard fire, uh, surrounded and drowned. 5 businesses, 16 homes. There were row homes that were involved. Randy Watts has a book about the firefighting in Lemoyne, and he has the information on that fire rather well documented.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the biggest fire I ever fought. Now, we fought a lot of store fires and apartment fires in the city of Harrisburg through Lemoyne. Burns Furniture Store, Keystone Rug. Here again, Dave Halcyon.
Yeah.
God bless him.
Well, I guess, my thought is, so 65, you're 18 years old now. You're the third person on this scene. Can't get within 50 yards of it because it's so hot. I mean, what are you thinking? What were the people that are arriving with you thinking? I mean, how much are you just like, or is it just, are you not thinking at that point? And it's just, as you said,
At that
drown
point,
it
at
as
that
much.
point, the chiefs, there were 3 fire chiefs. They were all there. Captain, Lieutenant, Lower Allen. Lower Allen responded with Lemoyne a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Dutch Hallbecker was fire chief in Lower Allen. Bill Fair was fire chief in Lemoyne. I remember them saying, all we got to do is get water on it and we can take it, but we can't get close enough to it with our 1.5 or 2.5 inch lines.
Yeah.
Could we get around the back? Could we, what could we do? There was a hardware store in that, one of those businesses, and they had spray cans of paint. They started exploding. And I can remember it sounded like gunshots.
Yeah.
And I can remember us saying, and we tried to concentrate on that space because, we finally put 2 and 2 together that they were spray cans that were exploding. And eventually we got enough water in the right place that we could get close to it. And of course, I mean, they were all, everything was burnt to the ground.
Yeah.
There was nothing left of, there was nothing left of anything except there were houses. Their first and second floor were burned, and they were destroyed. And but it was just, I hate to say it again, but put the wet stuff on the red stuff.
Yep.
And that's just what we tried to do. I mean, they were reevaluating all the time how we're going to get it, because I went into that, and as soon as I got close enough to it, I said, I can't get any closer. I mean, I could feel my eyebrows hot. I don't think they burned as I backed off.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we didn't have air masks. So, nope.
Yeah.
Even 2 years later, or how many years later, we still didn't use them all.
Yeah. Boy. And then, do you think one of the reasons why those, I mean, 2 of the more memorable fires happened early on in your career, is that partially also just because of the technology getting better, or things improving, or
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Because we had this relationship with this fire equipment salesman,
mm-hmm.
he was bringing us up to speed on what was being invented, what was being used. My friend John Starr was in the Air Force, retired as a firefighter, and then went to work as a firefighter in Philadelphia area. And his station happened to be right across the street from Hearst gear shift things.
Mm-hmm.
And they were inventing a thing called the Jaws of Life. And they would take it to their firehouse and they would test things for the Jaws of Life. Lemoyne was the first company to get the Jaws of Life and we trained the jaws of life everywhere. When the jaws first came out, they were very heavy. They were very usable. We trained a lot on them. We went around to as many places as we could go to uh, show the jaws of life. Hearst had a little AMC Gremlin, I believe it was, that they had all the jaws of life information and equipment in it, and we showed it a lot. We used it a lot. We went to a lot of calls where we needed to use it. There was a call where someone came across the Market Street Bridge into Wormleysburg, and if you're familiar in that area, it's a turn to go to Lemoyne. You can't do it as fast as this individual was doing it. He ended up in the woods and was trapped in the car. And we, of course, were called. And we decided that the best way to do it was to take the roof of the car off. With the jaws of life, they had a scissors. And once you put the scissors on the thing on the car, you could have those posts cut in no time at all. We took the roof off, and we got the person out, and we had a live extraction of that individual. Don't know what the outcome of it was, but the newspaper people, God love them, reported the next day that it was a convertible that was in the accident. And I can remember us saying, "What a convertible that we got there."
Yeah.
Now, I mean, now there again, we'd have to look at the newspaper article and see exactly what they said. Allied Picks was always good, and it was probably
it's where Jim worked.
Jim worked.
Picks.
They were very, very good. If we'd see a picture, we could go to their facility on Cameron Street, and we'd buy the picture. Now, it was very, I think it was, at the time, it was like 50, 75 cents to buy a picture. And we have a lot of, I personally have a lot of pictures of fires that probably he took that came from Allied Picks, because they were very, very nice people to work with. Nice, I mean, they were very cooperative, and I mean, you couldn't ask for people to report. I don't ever remember them making a negative report about what we did or didn't do wrong. Did we do some things wrong? Yes. We had a situation where we had a young man who didn't have the training, and he was Fire Chief John Starr wanted a line advanced to him in the second floor. So they brought up to him a 2.5-inch line without a nozzle on it. And I remember him saying, "My thumbs ain't that big."
Yeah.
And were there mistakes? Was there lack of training? You know, did we make mistakes like that? Yes. I went to one fire, Lemoyne Diner, in the bottleneck of Lemoyne, and we had pre-connected 1.5-inch attack lines. And so I got out of I rode in the officer side. I might have been a lieutenant at the time. And I went around and I said, "Pull that pre-connected line." I looked, and all the pre-connected lines had been disconnected. So from the time we got to the scene until I called for those pre-connected lines, someone had disconnected them, and we could never find out who disconnected them. I immediately took that truck out of service, and we used the next truck in. We put the fire out. It was the steps were, it was a restaurant. I remember the steps were so greasy. As soon as we went down in the basement, we slipped on the steps, and I mean, we saved the building.
Yeah. Well, I got to thinking. We've at the society been posting a number of the covered bridges, and I know a lot of them were destroyed by suspicious fires. Did you ever respond to a covered bridge fire?
Yes. The Yellow Breeches Bridge by Spangler's Mill was probably the only covered bridge fire I can remember responding to. And I can remember responding to it, and we had hose lines out, but by the time we got there, you could see it was gone.
Yeah.
Randy Watts has, or someone has, a picture of that particular Cumberland covered bridge burning.
Mm.
I've not been able to find it. I've looked for it. My friend John Starr passed away in December. He fell and hit his head, had that brain surgery, and never recovered.
Mm.
But he and I had looked for pictures of that, and we couldn't find it. He had a lot of pictures. But that's probably the biggest covered bridge. But we didn't. We responded to it, but we didn't. I mean, we had hose lines, and I don't know if anybody came in from the York County side, but I know we were all on the Cumberland County side there by Spangler's Mill.
Yeah.
And I believe that's when they replaced it with a concrete bridge.
That tended to be what happened.
Somewhere I saw a list, and it might have been in response to one of the Facebook. I'm on 100 Facebook pages, and someone started talking about the bridges in Cumberland County that burned.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised that there was only listed, or maybe you guys posted. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think someone posted it in response to your comment on our page.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was surprised that there was a very few that were arson. Now, the Spangler's Mill Bridge was
Mm-hmm.
considered arson.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, a lot of them are suspicious. I don't think they've confirmed a lot of them as being
Yes.
arson, but that's what they suspect.
As a young officer, I went to arson detection school. It was held at what at the time was called York Junior College, and we went there and to determine arson or even the seat of a fire,
Mm-hmm.
it's tough. It's tough. Uh, we anytime in our fire company that we had a suspicious, we called in the state fire marshal, and they did all the work. And I can remember them coming up with causes and arson, and yeah, we had some arsons, and yes, there were some convictions, and yes, there were some there were things we put the fire out. It turned out to be arson, and our chiefs were always able to do the testimony. Whatever had the firefighters never did testimony, but there were convictions, and it always amazed me, even after being to the arson detection school, how it's done. How I mean, they taught us a lot, and they taught us what to be looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Going to a working fire, if you see somebody with a glazed look on their face, you have to be aware of what's going on around you, and
Yeah.
if you see it, report it. If you see it, say something. Uh, we did identification of burned bodies, which was probably the worst class in firefighting training I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there were many of us were, well, we turned away. I mean, it was very gruesome. Uh, we trained rappelling, where you hooked a rope to a building and then repelled with a rope.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been to rescue training school at the Lewistown Fire School, which was a state operated fire school, decent fire school. I mean, I mean, they had good instructors and they had good. I mean, it was good training. Right after I graduated high school in '65, that summer I went up to firefighting one, rescue one, and might have been teaching. I don't remember.
Hmm.
But anyhow, it was a great school. I mean, I don't even know if it exists. I don't know, but I know that. But because I had been to the rescue school, I taught the rappelling class uh, out at, strangely enough, the Lou Lisburn Firehouse is across the street from. It was a flour mill, and we strung our ropes from the top floor down and went to the second to the top floor, and that's where we rappelled down.
Mm.
And they're a good class, a really, really good class. Everybody there rappelled at least once.
Yeah.
Now there were guys that said they did it once and didn't want to do it again. And my friend, it's probably Bill Luda. He was fire chief for a while, a long while. When you're rappelling, the guy holding the tail rope could stop you in the middle of going down.
Hmm.
So he always liked to get me halfway down and he'd pull it and I'd stop. And then he'd turn around and start talking to the people. And I said, "You want to let me down now, Chief?"
Yeah.
I retired from firefighting prior to West Shore and Lemoyne and Ormleysburg merging. And I just said that at that time, I can't even remember how old I was, but I said, I'm too old for this. And I still used to take a lot of pictures.
Yeah. I just came across this photo today. It may or may not be relevant, but did you ever do any training at the Claremont Farm?
Yes. When we were training with the Cumberland County Firemen's Association, they had a training officer, and I can't remember his name, but he was really, really good. And we would go up there, and there was a fire training school. As I recall, it was either along the turnpike or along 81.
Hmm.
But I remember one of those things, they had a building, a firehouse. It was a fire building where they would set fires, and we would train them going out. And yes, we did training there. We trained a lot of car fires there. Uh, I always thought that it was in. I've always thought it was Claremont Farms property. Now you'll have to decide. I think someone, Randy Watts, Randy Watts would know totally where it was, and
Yeah.
probably has it in one of his books. He is still. I mean, I assume he's still active here. I don't know,
Hmm.
but anyhow, I know that he did a lot of books on Carlisle, and I'm sure that there was a book about the training at Cumberland County Fire Training Academy. It may have been called. Now
Sure.
that's now a 77-year-old memory. Yes, but we did training there. Uh, we at the time tried to do as much training as we could. West Shore Fire Chiefs Association, which was a group of the West Shore Fire Chiefs, did a lot of training at different stations. And somewhere I have a diploma that I did that. Totally different than what it is today. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very. I mean, it's to become a firefighter today. You really need to think that you're going to go into it as a paid man, because the volunteers are. You're doing this for free. I did it for free all my life, but I can understand. And most of the fire companies now have live-in firefighters. They're basically firefighters, but they get room and board. I mean, that's a whole nother subject, that how it uh, evolved from nobody. Carlisle had paid drivers. I responded in Carlisle with Friendship for the number of calls. We had family lived in Carlisle, and we visited a lot, so I became active there. Don't remember. I don't need to want to use the word action, but there's not a lot of
Sure.
not a lot of. I mean, they had a lot of fires, but I don't know that I was at them, because
Yeah.
Lemoyne wasn't called. Now Lemoyne Lemoyne could be called anywhere.
Hmm.
Then there was another lumberyard fire in Lemoyne after I had retired. The Lafferty lumber burned, and then Otto and Hollinger burned before West Shore burned. Otto and Hollinger on Market Street burned. I wasn't a firefighter. So we had 4 lumberyards in Lemoyne, and 3 of them burned.
Boy.
Beadham Lumber Company never burned. I worked there.
Well, I always like to end by asking, is there anything I should have asked or that you want to mention before we close?
I would love to see a group of the firefighters in my era that are still alive get together and do a talk
Yeah.
of such as we were doing, that could correct things I said. They could say things and correct things I said. And we had this plan to do that. My friend John Starr, not only was he fire chief and I was his assistant chief, he was a very close friend. And we would go out to eat once a month. And all we retired firefighters, we called ourselves, as we made reservations at the restaurants. I mean, there was always like 15 or 20 of us. And we'd go out, and we always made reservations so that we could have a table and we'd sit together. And we used the, I forget, was it the VFW in Lower Allen? Went for a long time. And then they got away from there. Then I got sick and I couldn't attend with it. And then I had several other of it. And then my friend got repellent, and they never had it. But the conversations we had after we were done eating. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? Do you remember this? And I often thought that we should be recording it
Yeah.
so that someone can edit it. Take the. I mean, all
Sand off the rough edges.
bingo. I think you've asked me. I mean, if you would continue asking questions, I'm sure I could rouse up memories from. I was 16, and I think I was 20. I might have been 31 when I stopped fighting fire.
Hmm.
I would have to. I'd have to look up and see when West Shore Bureau of Fire was invented.
Well, unfortunately, that's all I have. But
Okay.
but yeah, thank you so much for coming down to the society today and sharing your memories of both the Brandtsville derailment, the lumber yard there in '65, and other stories. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.